Thank you. So, good day to everyone. And I would like you to imagine a cake. Just a cake, okay? So it can be your favorite cake made by you or by your mom, or some cake from the nearest pastry shop, just ordinary favorite cake. And of course, I have my ideas about how perfect cake looks like, and you have your ideas. So let's compare our ideas. My cake can look like this, or and it has some fillings inside, or like this, or like this. And that's why I'm here today, and I would like to talk about my concept and about my creations. So people have been consuming sweet for ages, and if you try to find some information about first sweets, for example, ice cream was invented more than 4,000 years ago, and people just mixed ice with fruits and with fruit and berries and ate it like ice cream. But for many years in the past, sugar was a true luxury item, and sweets, only rich people could buy sweet things. But in 19th century, everything changed, and sugar became accessible almost to everyone because sugar production increased. And at the same time, in Europe, tradition to finish meal with some sweet dessert was born, and this tradition still exists nowadays. So my family and I, we are not an exception, and we also usually eat some sweets, some cakes after meal. And of course, there are some people who don't want to eat any sweets, but I'm not among them. I really want to eat cakes and croissants, ice cream. I like it. And this is one of the reasons why I became pastry chef, because I wanted to cook it and I wanted to eat it. So when I was 15, I decided to be an architect. I decided I want to be an architect. Of course, I had no idea that objects of my design would be cake. And I graduated from University of Architecture and Design, and I worked as an interior designer for a few years. But then something happened, and I started baking and cooking. Of course, I cook for me and for my family. And for me, it was very important when a dish and when meal was beautifully presented and beautifully served. And what can be more beautiful than a cake? So I don't know. For me, it's a cake. So I started baking, and in general, I saw for the first time in my life, I saw mousse glazed cake maybe 6 years ago. And I was totally shocked, and for me, it was like a miracle. Oh my God, it was so shiny, so bright, so unusual for me, and it was something very new. And modern cake, for me and for people, it's not, it's not just a sponge cake with cream and sugar and berries. It's something bigger, and it's a real art, and it's a real science. And modern pastry chefs, it's not just ordinary people who make the same things day by day. They compete with each other. They need to make some creative things. They need to make pieces of art. And I would like to show you a modern pastry world from that side to show that it can be real art. So I started baking, and of course I had my social networks, and I wanted to share my passion, my hobby with my followers, with my friends, and I started posting pictures on my Instagram. And then I noticed that some creative objects usually attracted much more attention and got more likes, for example. And I started to think about my own molds, own designs. But unfortunately, it was almost impossible to make some special objects using just ordinary molds from mass production, because everybody had the same mold, so I could make only the same things. So I started to think about my own molds. And I started to think about 3D printer. To be honest, at that time, I knew nothing about 3D printing. Okay, so there is some 3D printer. But now I work with it a lot, and for me, it's just ordinary tool, like a standard mixer on my kitchen, so I work with it almost every day. And 3D printing was invented maybe 30 or 40 years ago, and with 3D printer, we can print very tiny, small objects, like for jewelry, or big objects like house. And it's possible, can you imagine, big printed house for 4,000 square meters and 400 square meters, and it's possible. However, I work with much modest objects, just my molds, and I work with plastic. My first mold I printed a couple years ago, and it was the cake from this mold. And I wanted to make some special cake, and this cake is it has very aggressive design with sharp edges and strict lines and with provocative colors. And for me, it was important to make something different to surprise people. So we made this cake, and then this experiment was successful, and I realized that, okay, now I can do anything I want, almost everything. Yes, I would like to talk about the 3D printing process. So what you have to do, it's a small lesson. You need to make a 3D model. You can use any software. For example, I work with 3ds Max, Grasshopper, Archicad, AutoCAD, Houdini, different software. Then you have to print this mold, and you will have a printed mold. I call it prototype. Then you have printed mold, and you have to pour silicone on the top and wait a few hours, and you will have just some silicone mold. And inside you have to put some ingredients, some recipe. And at the end, also it's very important part for me to create very good recipe, because recipe is very important, and we need to have very good textures inside and very good flavors inside. Otherwise, people won't buy it second time. And you see, they were different layers, and it was a cake. So when you have your recipe, you put inside some ingredients, and you need to freeze it. And after, you just need to finish it with glazing or spraying, and you have your cake. And it's not the end. And my last step is making photos and videos, and it's a big separate part for me. And usually I try to make very good visual content, because it's very important for me. Just a few people can eat my cakes. I don't have any mass production, I don't have any shop now, but everybody can see my cakes, my creations. So I want to share good pictures, and I want to surprise people. And this is my next step and my next goal. I want to surprise and inspire people, because when you see my cake, if you see it for the first time, you can't understand what is it. Whether it is, I don't know, some piece of furniture, some tray or vase or something, plastic toy. But if you cut it, you have inside a lot of different layers. They can be crunchy or fluffy, gentle, with chocolate, with different fruits. It's a real cake. And I want to inspire people, and some people write me, like, you are my inspiration, and I started to bake, I want to be a pastry chef, I changed my career, and I'm very happy about it, because I want to share my passion also. And once Malevich worked with his students on some manufacturing, and they were making some design for teapot. And when director of this manufacturing, he came and saw this teapot, and he said, it's a good idea, but it's not very convenient, this teapot. And sometimes my cake, it's not just a cake, it's idea of a cake. And Malevich answered him, it's not a teapot, it's an idea of a teapot. So I try to just make some ideas and to share them. And for example, here, a lot of people think that it's glass, but it's a sugar. This is sugar box. My next step, I wanted to explain my projects a little bit. So it's a cherry cake. We used 3D Max to make this mold, and we just made a 3D modeled cherry, and we put inside invisible box a lot of cherries, and then we hide this box, and at the end we had just a lot of cherries stuck together. And you see this process, just a lot of cherries. Then, of course, I finished it with my hand, and also I can show this. I can show this mold. So it was the mold, and then we made silicone mold, and of course we made a cake. And after you cover it with glaze, it looks like real cherries just stuck together. And of course, if you cut it, you have different layers inside, and this is cherry cake, of course, with cherry taste and with dark chocolate and cherry. And by the way, this video got more than 9 million views, and for me it was a very big surprise also. Yeah, so it's eatable. Yeah. So my next cake, I call it cluster cake, and using Voronoi diagram, we splitted this shape, and we tried to make stone effect, so like we have a lot of stones. And then we just broke off some of them, and we had this stone cake mold, and it looks very nice. And this is work of Venezuelan artist, and his name is Jos Margulis, and he works with 3D sculptures and compositions, and he works usually with plastic, metal, and acrylic sheets, but he sent me his drawings, and I made this. But I made it of chocolate, so it was chocolate, they were just chocolate sheets. And of course we made a video. Every time we try to make photos and videos. Here we're using also milling machine, and this was yogurt cake, by the way, with berry, and we used milling machine to cut these chocolate sheets. I just prepared a lot of sheets with colorful chocolate, and we made it in my city in some laboratory, and this guy created also this milling machine by himself. So here we tried to show how we can collaborate, how different people from different professions can make some interesting project together. We were 3 people: artist, engineer, and pastry chef, and we created such collection. We called it kinetic tarts, and totally we made 4 different tarts. Yes, here it's a picture of ferrofluid. Ferrofluid, it's some liquid that can be strongly magnetized in presence of magnetic fields, and it was big inspiration for me, and I dreamed about this shape, and finally I made it like a cake. We made it just 2 months ago. Especially this shape I made for collaboration with Spanish pastry chef. His name is Jordi Bordas, and he is world champion. And here, my second main goal, I want to explain you that modern cakes, they can be healthy. So here, for example, it's a totally vegan cake, and there is no cream, no butter, no flour, and no eggs, but it's still mousse cake with airy textures inside. Instead of this, we have inside mango, lychee, passion fruit, strawberry, and even cactus flower. And this cake was very tasty, and it was quite complex to create this recipe without these ingredients, even without gelatin or cream. It's not easy, and you have to be smart. You have to know a lot about chemical processes, physical processes, and to create such recipe. And I would like to tell that modern cakes, it's not just sugar with berries, with butter mixed together. They can be healthy. We can keep all vitamins inside. we can have strong flavor without any special ascension. And it's also very important for me to share that we can make very good and tasty cakes without low on sugar and low on fat. So it was the cake. So my main message, if we eat this cake just a few years during a year, maybe for some celebration, for birthday, for I don't know, for some holiday, try to find your perfect, tasty, beautiful cake, like I did. Okay, thank you.